name is John Simmons. On today's episode, we're talking with Ginny Brant, who had a cancer diagnosis given to her a few months after her mom passed away of cancer, and she was still dealing with the grief of that. She was able to find healing through God because of some different methods she was using in her treatment. She's going to talk about that. Those methods turned into a book where she figured 8 steps, a mixture of medicine, a mixture of God-given wisdom, where she was able to combine these things that she used to find healing in her cancer diagnosis. And now she encourages others who are facing cancer. She has a passion to help everyone understand that cancer is something that we can do both preventative medicine and also preventative treatment, and also just believing and trusting in God in the process to find healing through Christ. And so she has an incredible testimony that she's going to share with us today. Let's invite her on the show now. Ginny, how are you doing?
I'm doing fine from here in South Carolina.
Well, South Carolina, we welcome you here from St. Louis. We're very excited to hear about your journey. Your story starts off 4 months after you lost your mother to cancer, and you, a self-described health nut, find yourself facing a cancer diagnosis for yourself. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, honestly, I was shocked, but my sister will be the first to tell you that, it was the providence of God that I found the breast tumor. I found it myself. It was missed on 3 mammograms, and it was after I had been in the Charleston 10-kilometer run. That night, my ring got caught in my nightie, and then it awakened me, and I felt the tumor, and I went, oh my goodness. So it was like God had my back the entire time. But it was a shock, and I really didn't think it would be cancer because it was 4 months after my mother died, and I was still grieving her loss. And so it was totally unexpected. And when the doctor said it's cancer, that was the first shock. The second shock was it's aggressive. Nobody wants to hear that.
Oh, yeah.
And then the surgical oncologist met with me to show me the MRI results. And I just figured they were going to be fine. And he said, no, it's not fine. It looks like it's in your lymph nodes and all over your body. And, we're going to do everything we can to save your life, but at the best, we can only extend your life. And we don't know for how long. And I was like, whoa, I feel fine. This doesn't make sense. So I asked him to show me that MRI, and he projected it up on a large screen, life size. And I said, is that me? Was that the date I actually had the biopsy? And this test, is this all right? Could that be me? Because it looked like a tornado had invaded my body. And that begins in my book, the analogy in my book to the Wizard of Oz, because I saw so many funny and clever analogies as I was going through the journey. I'm like Dorothy trying to get back home, not to Kansas, but to a normal life, because I'm realizing that cancer is as common as tornadoes in Kansas.
Yeah.
1 in every 2 people in the generation born today will have cancer in their lifetime. And that's too many. Too many.
Yeah, that's an incredible statistic I was not unaware of. I'm listening to you tell your story about, getting this incredible news and how you're dealing with it. And you're talking about now you've got this book, and we'll put the picture on the screen, and we'll have the link in the description for everybody. Unleash Your God-Given Healing. So you're talking about the analogies and the stories that you pulled out of your experience and put into this book. But this happened, I'm sure, down the road. I imagine in that moment, you felt like you were going through a test. And talk to us a little bit about your health prior to being diagnosed, and talk to us about, what it really felt like during those initial, revelations that you have this disease and you got to start a new battle in life.
I was a health nut. I felt perfectly fine. There was no indication that I had cancer, and I certainly didn't feel like I had cancer. So again, it was a shock because I'd spent a lot of my life trying not to have cancer because it was very prevalent in my family. And to turn up and get this aggressive stage 4 diagnosis was just more than I could bear. But I'll tell you, it guided me. The first thing my husband and I did when I was diagnosed, he laid hands on me and prayed that God would guide us and that God would heal me, whether miraculously or whether through medicine or whatever. And I could feel God's presence all the way through the journey as he was guiding me. I mean, just the fact that I found the cancer when I wasn't looking for it. And women should be checking their breast monthly, okay? I wasn't doing that. Yet I found it. Again, the providence of God. But we had so many difficult decisions to make. And we would just pray, God, guide us, show us what to do. And he was showing us and he was guiding us. And when I asked this one question, I wanted to know, first of all, what caused my cancer? Because if I can't figure out some of the things that caused it, how am I going to prevent it from coming back? And then I wanted to know, when every weapon of mass destruction was going to be brought out to save my life, I wanted to know what I could do to lessen the side effects of all those treatments and help my doctors beat my cancer. And that sent me on a quest to research like crazy, from the Bible to health seminars, to going to cancer conventions, listening to doctors all over the world, give their seminars on cancer, and I could interact and ask them questions. And I just had this insatiable appetite that I just had to know. And so I wouldn't stop until every stone was unturned. And God was showing me, you need to look at this. You need to look at that. You need to look at hydration. You need to look at your diet. You think you're a health nut. Maybe not. Maybe not. So I started realizing things in our environment that were impacting my cancer journey, why I was here in this journey. And then I realized, oh my goodness, these are the same things that everyone around me is doing every single day. And then I realized the rates of cancer, and I realized, maybe I could have a part in helping people to avoid this journey and get through it. Now, I have to be honest with you, John. I went to the chaplain at the Cancer Treatment Centers of America, which is not, too awfully far from you. They were my second opinion, because that terrible diagnosis scared me into getting a second opinion. And that was a good thing. And that chaplain told me, he said, Ginny, I know you're a health nut. I know you're disappointed it didn't, keep you from getting cancer, but it will help you get through the journey. And he was right. He also said something almost prophetic. He said, Ginny, consider this, because you're an author and a speaker, a gift from God for you to help other people. Now, John, my first response was not a very nice response. I clearly said, I don't want the gift. I don't want to talk about cancer. I don't want to speak about cancer. I don't want to go through this journey. But the more I learned, the more I felt compelled to share what I had learned so that other people could benefit.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've talked to a couple people who have had cancer battles on this show or in the past on the radio show, and I've heard testimonies of people overcoming it. And I've heard something different in your testimony than I've heard in theirs, is that, the questions that you asked were a little different. You're like, how did I get this? Like, there is no cure for cancer. We don't always know where it stems from, but that was a question that was stemming in your head. In other testimonies, I've heard people sort of, they'll put on themselves, why me? Why is this happening? And they'll sort of get themselves in a position of trying to figure it out. And you were trying to figure out, but from a different perspective. But your first mode of action was to have your husband lay hands on you. And we want to just remind people that, the first thing we should do when we're facing a problem is go to God with it. And you experienced that. But then you went on this, journey of research, which is not, some people will like read about cancer. They might get in a support group. They might, get pamphlets from the doctor. But what you did was a whole nother level. So did you, when you were going on this journey to sort of fill your heart and your mind with all of this new information, were you doing this from a heart of like, I want to give something back to the world? Or were you just simply trying to answer the questions that were in your own heart?
Honestly, I was trying to help myself. I was trying to figure out how I was going to live with this terrible diagnosis and how I was going to get through it and come out like Dorothy back home, or healthy on the other end. It took me a while to realize, what that chaplain said was true. This information could help so many people, but I was just I was desperate. And cancer patients get that way. It's one thing to have cancer removed and it's gone. Once the surgery is over, it's gone. It's another thing to know that you will go through every treatment there is, and there will be extensive side effects. And, to be perfectly honest, you can die from the treatments. And so the first thing I had to realize that, just as I learned back when, I came to Christ as a teenager at 16 years old in Washington, D.C. through a group called Young Life. And they discipled me and taught me the power of prayer. And 6 months after I gave my life to Christ, my mother was diagnosed with severe depression, and then my father was tried in the Watergate trials. And
Oh
so
boy.
I learned early in life to go to God first because this was too far beyond me, that I had to go to prayer. I had to go to his word, and it got me through, and God answered my prayers in just unbelievable ways. And that's in my first book, Finding True Freedom from the White House to the World. So when I got to this cancer journey, I knew that God is going to work through this for my good, for the good of the kingdom, because I am his child and I'm his follower. And I didn't know at that point, with all they were telling me, whether I was going to live or whether I was going to die. But here's the deal with a Christian, because I had a student teach me this when I was in the school system. She died from cancer, but she taught everyone around her how to live and how to die in the faith. And I said, it may be I will die from this, but I will die glorifying God and giving blessing and thanksgiving for all he's done in my life. So, it was a tough battle, but now that I'm on the other side of it, instead of going through it now, I'm helping other people go through it, because people can help when
Sure.
they've been there and they understand the fears and the feelings. But I'm going to tell you, you cannot live in fear going through a cancer journey every day. You have to get on top of that roller coaster and start using your faith to manage your emotions, because fear, constant fear, and all these negative emotions can drive the cancer. And once I realized that, I said, I've got to get on top of this, because sometimes I would be fearful. Sometimes I'd be full of faith. And it's normal to have fear in the cancer journey, but you can't live by fear. You must live by faith and use your faith to manage those negative emotions.
Those are strong and powerful words for anybody who's dealing with this. And we know that you're on the other side of it now and you're helping people. Let's talk about when you were in the middle of it, because I think part of your testimony of going through the battle is very impressive. And what you talk about and you describe in various things I've read about you is that you were up running before chemotherapy treatments, and you had sort of a different resume, when it comes to what you were doing in the midst of your battle. Here's a picture of you and your husband. Previously mentioned you guys were on a bridge run during your chemo treatment. There's another picture of you. You're
Now
walking
stop
2
at that
miles.
picture.
Okay.
I got to tell you about this right here. After my first surgery, I had 100 stitches. And I asked the nurse, I had so many tubes protruding from my body, and it's driving me crazy. And I said, what do I got to do to get this catheter out, first of all? And that nurse said, if you can walk 4 rounds of the hospital floor tomorrow morning, I'll take the catheter out. That was my motivation. I got up at 6 a.m., walked 4 rounds. I said, how many to a mile? He said, 18. I don't think you can do that. I said, don't say can't. I walked 2 miles that day. The amazing thing is what it did for my body after surgery to promote healing, to lessen the risk of blood clots, to pump the anesthesia out of my body. And all these tubes you're supposed to go home with after a breast cancer surgery, they pulled them all that afternoon, and I went home early. So movement is key to healing in the body. And then when I got to the chemotherapy, who wants chemotherapy? Nobody does. And I was nervous about it. So I told my husband, I'm going to walk 2 miles before and 2 miles afterwards, and 2 to 3 miles every day in between, if I can. I was able to do it. And then when I finished the chemotherapy and all my blood work came back within normal ranges just 6 weeks after chemotherapy. Now keep in mind, this takes 2 to 5 years, usually. The doctors were puzzled, and they said, this is amazing. And then later on, they pointed me to some research in Australia that shows that exactly what I did to manage stress and anxiety is exactly the best thing a chemotherapy patient can do, and a cancer patient can do at every part of treatment. They're now telling people, walk before chemotherapy, walk after chemotherapy, move as much as you can. It's only going to help promote healing in your body and keep your immune system up and pump the toxins out of your body once they do their job. You don't want that chemotherapy recirculating in your body. That's what sends people into sepsis. So now they're starting to tell people that. I did it by instinct to relieve stress and anxiety. And it was just the providence of God, again, guiding me, even though I didn't understand and I wasn't doing it to
Yeah.
enhance the chemo. The research now shows at MD Anderson, it enhanced the chemo targeting my cancer and did so many things for my body. I mean, I was snow skiing during chemotherapy. I was doing it all. And I never felt horrible. I never felt horrible. But again, if you follow the 8 steps in the book, you're not as likely to have as many side effects.
It's just, it's almost overwhelming trying to figure out how God can use a cancer in someone to open up avenues of treatment that have been undiscovered, essentially, in terms of how to treat this sort of thing, by using someone who just happens to be the person who's going to do this, right? Like, you're the one who wants to get up and can't hear the word can't, and you're going to walk around 36 times around your floor so that you can get this tube out. Like, God's put the right person in the right place at the right time. Every time I hear someone's testimony and they have these sort of can't make this up moments, the reason I love doing this type of programming, because it's so encouraging to me. For you, as you sort of unraveled some of those different things in the book, you've already mentioned the 8 steps. So talk to us a little bit more about the 8 steps and unravel more for us at home some of these things that you figured out through the wisdom of God, that you're able to speak to people in how they're treating cancer in a God-given way now.
Okay. Well, one of the things I learned is that the same 8 steps that got me through the cancer journey are the same 8 steps that prevent cancer to begin with and prevent recurrence, because there's one thing in common with all cancer patients. If you beat the cancer and you're a cancer survivor, you don't want it coming back. And so it all has to do with how God created our beautifully and wonderfully made body with self-healing mechanisms. But here's the caveat. They only work when we do the right things. Water is key to every cell, every organ, and every system in our body. However, if we don't get enough hydration, then all those things don't work as God intended. So proper hydration is key, and it doesn't cost you anything. Deep sleep is when our body rebuilds, regenerates, and detoxes itself. And a hormone called melatonin goes off, which is a major cancer fighter and immune builder. So if you're concerned about cancer or you're concerned about not getting COVID-19, the best thing you can do is get good sleep at night. So it's just simple things, but I think I probably learned the most about food and how God created everything in the plant kingdom for our healing. I eventually learned under a doctor at Harvard, that graduated from Harvard, Dr. William Lee, in his book, Eat to Beat Cancer, that every one of the plants in God's kingdom fights cancer. Some are more than others, but the average American eats 2 to 3 plants or fruits and vegetables a day when we really need to be eating more like 8 to 10. So we're not getting that cancer fighting power, and you better believe I'm eating my 8 to 10 today. So it's like God made these plants for our healing, and it's the one thing we've kind of dropped out of the standard American diet. We've processed everything. We only eat a few fruits and vegetables, and we think French fries counts. It does not. And so we've created a lot of our own problems because we haven't looked at the wisdom that God has given us in the Bible. And when he said to Adam and Eve, I've given you these plants to eat. And then we find out from science today, every phytochemical, every antioxidant, and that these plants actually promote healing in the body and complement our DNA. So it's just things like that, using food as medicine. And again, we talked about exercise. Exercise is the best thing a cancer patient can do and the best thing a person can do to prevent cancer to begin with. The body was made to rest at night and to move during the day.
Yeah. Those are biblical principles you're sharing. Water. I mean, how many verses in scriptures are there regarding water? For us to focus in and be intentional about our thoughts on water and sleep. God created us to sleep a third of our life. And so when we are intentional about those things, it makes sense that those are steps to help us heal, whether we're facing cancer or we're just trying to live a long and healthy life. So you've not necessarily unraveled brand new things, but God has allowed you to sort of put these things together in a method that can help people. And I want to encourage anybody who's interested in seeking your help to head over to your website, JinnyBrant.com. You can pick up a copy of her book. What else is going on at your website? Or you said you're an author and a speaker. Where else can people see you?
Well, mainly at the website, because on the website is my cancer prevention and wellness blog, and they can sign up for that and get a post every week. And a few weeks ago, I did a post on dense breast, now listed as a new risk factor for breast cancer. So new research comes out, and I keep going with the new research and the new things. And what's interesting is I had no risk factors for my breast cancer, nor did I have any genetics, but I did have dense breast. So I technically do have one of the risk factors. So every woman needs to ask her radiologist when she goes for a mammogram, do I have dense breast? Makes it hard to detect, and you're more likely to get breast cancer. So you need to have better detection devices. You may have to have some special tests done, 3D mammograms, thermograms, ultrasounds, because the mammogram is not going to catch your cancer, and it certainly didn't catch mine.
Yeah. Let's wrap up this conversation by sort of highlighting your journey with God during this process. So when you were walking through this, you were obviously believing for healing. You've already mentioned the different ways. You didn't really care how he healed you. You just wanted to be healed. So walk us through what that faith step of that journey was looking like.
Well, I just spent so much time in prayer and in gratitude because I was learning how miraculously God has created our body. And I was thankful for that. And when you realize what a wonderful body we have, that someone like me can go through the worst of chemotherapy. My doctors told me my chemotherapy was the harshest and the longest and the most difficult to survive. Yet, because of the self-healing mechanisms and the way God has created our body, it is possible to go through that and come through on the other side perfectly healthy. Now, let me be honest, I'm not promised tomorrow, okay? But with the lifestyle changes I have made, my risk of my cancer coming back is less than it would have been had I not changed my lifestyle. So I'm just grateful. I mean, I learned in the journey that when you concentrate on prayer and God's promises and the good things along the way and gratitude, that puts your body in a healing mode.
Yeah.
So it's just amazing how God has made the body, and the instructions that he gave us are so wonderful. He tells us in Philippians to pray about everything when you're in a crisis, give thanks, and concentrate on the good things. And that's very sound advice.
It makes it sound a little too easy, though, Jenny. When I look at a picture like this and you don't have any hair and everybody's smiling, was it as easy for those around you, your family and your husband specifically? Were they able to, latch on to the relationship with God and trust in him in the way that you're describing you were able to?
I would see my husband shed a tear when he didn't know I was looking. And of course, he was concerned. But let me tell you, the loss of hair is the least of your worries. I was worried about my heart, my lungs, my brain, my life. I didn't give a rip about the hair. It would come back. You don't worry about the little things. But I remember one of my sons came to me and said, Mom, I've never been prouder of you than the way you conducted yourself during the cancer journey. There are always people watching your faith to see if it's really real. Do you really believe in God? And do you really mean what you say? And I think the people that were watching around me were saying, you know what? Her faith is getting her through. And it's a part of how she is dealing with it. And it does make a difference. Your faith and your emotions do make a difference in the cancer journey. It's something your doctors can't control. All the 8 steps in my book are something your doctor can't control only you can control. And that's what I'm teaching cancer patients and cancer preventers to do, is to control what their doctors have no control over, so that you can prevent and get a better outcome if you are in the cancer journey.
That's great testimony that you share with us today, Ginny. It's a very uplifting message that you can trust God from the very beginning, even if it's an aggressive diagnosis. No matter what your condition is that you're currently facing, anyone out there, know that you can trust in God. And you've already shared, Ginny, that you weren't certain how it was going to end up, and you're not even promised tomorrow, even though that you've overcome this journey at this point. And so it's just evidence that your faith in God lets you have peace regardless of your circumstances. And that's such a great takeaway for anybody who's listening to your testimony today. Any last encouraging words you'd want to share with someone who's tuned into this testimony today?
Well, my new philosophy is every day is a gift from God for me to live and glorify Him. I don't know how many days that will be. No one else does either. And the 8 steps in my book are not just good for cancer. They're good for every chronic disease, including Alzheimer's, autoimmune disorders, anything out there, even COVID-19. You can boost your immune system with these 8 steps because it's the way God created the immune system to work. And we just need to get into sync with the way He created our bodies to work optimally.
Amen. Amen for that. All right. GinnyBrant.com is the website. Everybody go pick up a copy of one of her books, this one on healing. It can be a blessing to you, hopefully, today if you are believing for God to be bringing healing into your life and the life of a family member or a friend. We appreciate you, Ginny, for sharing your testimony on the show today.
Thank you, John.
Incredible story from Ginny, who is just really an encouragement to anybody. I mean, the way that she just fought and battled and, used the questions that she had in her mind when she was facing adversity. How many of us, when you're facing trouble, do you just start questioning your situation, questioning God, questioning the circumstances? Why me? What now? What do I do? Where do I go? How do I figure this out? So many of us have questions when facing adversity, and so did Ginny. And Ginny decided that she was going to research and she was going to figure out the answers to some of these questions in a way that some people don't turn. Some people don't go the research route. Some people go, pity party route. And if for any of us or anywhere in the middle of between those two things. And so I'm just so inspired by her story of trying to seek God in the middle of it. And first thing that happened was her husband laid hands on her and she said, I don't care how we're going to get healed, but God, you can heal us. And he did. And so she's healed now. And she's sharing her testimony of finding inner healing, whether it's cancer or anything else, through God-given wisdom in her book. So I encourage anybody to go pick that up. The link's in the description.